second Q&A video. So now before I start, I just got back to school 3 days ago, so progress on all the customs is going to slow down from now on because school comes first. I have to work on that before I can work on any of the horses. I only brought one project horse with me, and he's the one I'm using for my Breyerfest Best Custom project. He's in pieces right now, and he's still got more pieces to go. So the other thing I want to say before we get started with all the questions is that I've had a lot of people ask me about commissions within the last month that I've been home, and commissions are closed. I don't have any time because I'm at school, and I can't take on any while I'm here because I just don't have the time. And I'd rather not be holding on to people's horses for months and not being able to get any work done on them. So they're closed until this summer. When it gets close to the summer, don't ask me about them because I will post them. I will post them on Facebook. I will post them on Instagram, on my website. However, if you would like to get notified before it goes public, you can sign up for my newsletter, and the newsletter gets sent out 1 week via email before it gets put on any of my social media sites or on my website. So if you're serious about getting a commission this summer, you need to get on that list. And to do that, all you have to do is send me your email, and you can do that on Facebook, Instagram, or on my website, and I will put the links to all of those down in the description. I read and went through all of the questions that I received, and I have decided to put all of them in this Q&A, but if you don't see your question, it means that either I got the question multiple times and I can't use the same question multiple times, so I just picked one person, or it means I've already answered it in the other Q&A video that I did. So I started customizing in the very end of 2012. The very first custom I did, I think I was like 7 or 8, and I will put a picture of it here so that way you guys can see that, you know, not everybody who does art has started out good. I mean, you have to make progress. My biggest tip for other customizers is to just really pay attention to reference photos, because that is what makes the biggest difference, I think. If you can get, like, if you have a pattern colored horse, say you have an Appaloosa, it is very useful to get pictures of both sides of the same horse if you can, because two different horses may have slightly different color patterns or slightly different patterns, and it just doesn't work out if you try to stick them both on the same horse. They just don't quite look right. So to start out with, if you can get pictures of the same horse from both sides, especially if it's a patterned horse, and pay very close attention to where every single spot is and where every single edge of that pattern is, it will make a huge difference in, like, the finished look of your horse, instead of just throwing some spots on there because you wanted him to be a pinto. The hardest color for me to customize is probably like a buckskin or a palomino, just anything in that very, I don't know what you would call it, like a golden color. And I struggle with it because it's like, just with the colors I haven't quite come up with the right combination of colors to use to get a really good color. They always end up either a little too yellow or a little too brown, or sometimes a little too orange, just depending on what I put in there. So I'm still working on getting a good color formula for that one, but pretty much everything else I can get. It may not be with an airbrush, but I can get them with pastels if I can't get it with an airbrush. My favorite Breyer mold, I don't have one specific mold that is my absolute favorite. I conga Gem Twists, I conga Totalis, and I conga Henry the Fjord, and Carrick. That's the last one. So I don't really have one specific mold out of those 4 that I like any more than the others. So it's really just like those 4 are my favorites. And I don't really collect classics anymore. I sold off most of mine. I do still have a few of them that were special to me, or I also conga Mariah, that's a classic. But, and then stablemates, I don't conga a whole lot, so I don't think I really have a favorite stablemate mold. I think the Cantering Warm Blood is cute, but that's about it. I don't really have a specific stablemate mold that I like a lot. Favorite breed of horse is probably a Mustang, because that's kind of what got me started. That's why my studio is called Wild Horse Studios, is because the first customs I did were all based off of Mustangs. Most of them from the internet adoptions page, or just pictures that I found online of different Mustangs. I have a Mustang of my own that I've had for 8 years, and I absolutely love her. So that would probably be my favorite breed. But I also like things that have a little bit of color to them. Mustangs can have that too, so. And by color I mean just something that's a little bit more flashy, something, you know, that has spots or whatever. But a Mustang can have that, so that still fits. This was a question I got multiple times, I know I did. And honestly, it kind of depends on what kind of a mood I'm in, because right now I've kind of pushed myself away from some of the resins, because I have so many unpainted resins that I'm planning on keeping that I just haven't had the time to paint. So I don't want to spend a whole bunch of money on unpainted models that I may not get to for 10 years. I don't know. And I was really into stones the last few years, but then just this last year I've kind of had some problems where, it wasn't really problems with their horses, but I went to a couple of their shows and they just did a couple of things that I thought was very bad customer service wise and very just bad ethics on their part. So I don't know, it's kind of a toss-up. Every once in a while, recently, I'll find a stone that I really like and I feel like I need to have, but I've been leaning much more towards Breyers since about last summer. So it kind of goes back and forth depending on what mood I'm in. As a general color, my favorite color is red or purple, depending on what I'm doing or what I need it for. Red is usually what I lean towards because that's what looks good on my horses, my real horses. Purple really doesn't go very well on either of them. As far as horse color, my favorite horse color, I really like Red Dun and I really like Grullo. Don't know why, but I do. I just think that those are really pretty horses. I would one day like to have a Mustang in one or both of those colors. So I think what inspired me to start customizing was just seeing everyone else do it, just seeing what all of these other people were able to do. Even though, at that point, I didn't think that I could ever be able to do anything that was worth anything or anything that could show or anything, besides just a horse from my shelf that I repainted. But that was kind of what got me into it, is that I saw all of these other horses that other people had painted, and at some point I just decided that I wanted to be able to do that too. So I took a pasteling class at Breyerfest, and it's probably one of the best classes I've ever taken at Breyerfest, because a lot of the classes there are almost too easy, I think. If you have absolutely no experience, they're perfect for that. But if you have somewhat of a clue what you're doing, and I did at the time when I was taking the class, I kind of knew the basics in what I was doing. Like the Breyerfest classes aren't very helpful if you know the basics and you want to go farther, at least to me. So I wanted, I hadn't worked with pastels going into this, so the pastel class was very, very helpful to me. And I'll put a picture of the horse that I did in progress and then what it looked like finished. I finished it about 2 years later after the class. and I finished him as a bay brindle. But it taught me a lot about how to use pastels, and I still use everything that I learned from that class now. The other classes, I think I only took one other class. The one other class I took was a sculpting class, and all I learned how to do was to make a new mane on top of a mane that was already there, and I already knew how to do that. I mean, I could, stick it on there and put some lines in it. I knew how to do that. I was hoping something a little bit more advanced than that, and that wasn't helpful to me. So, Breyerfest classes, if you're thinking about doing one, only recommended if you're very, very starting out customizing. They're not very helpful if you kind of know what you're doing, or if you're looking to try a different technique, like if you're used to doing painting and then you want to do pasteling, that's helpful too, because they'll teach you the very basics of that and the stuff that you need to know to start out with that, and then you can practice it on your own once you get home. I actually have 4 now. I think it's either 3 or 4, I don't remember. I think it's 4. And they're all on my channel. I even have a little playlist of all 4 of them. They're very long. They're probably about half an hour long each. So I can put the playlist in the description, and then you can go and find the how-to videos I've done so far. I am planning on making more of them. I just haven't had time for them because it takes me so much longer to paint things in a video than it would for me to just do it. So, because I have to explain everything as I go along. So as soon as I have time to do another video, I will do one. And I have all of your suggestions for future videos saved in a file. So like I said, as soon as I get time, I will do some. I use epoxy sculpt. It comes in a 2-part epoxy like this. You can get it in all kinds of different colors. I prefer white. It doesn't really make any difference because after you prime over it, you can't really tell anyway. But it's a 2-part epoxy, which means that you have to mix them together for it to work. You can't just use the bottom jar and stick it on there. It won't harden or dry or anything. But you mix equal amounts or close to equal amounts together, and then you can work with it for, I usually work with it right away, but you can work with it for up to 3 hours, which is lots of time. And then within 24 hours it will be completely hard, and you can sand it and you can do all kinds of stuff to it after it's dry or hardened. I do. I own 2 horses. One of them is a she'll be 24 this year, 24-year-old Mustang mare. I got her when she was 16. She had virtually no training. She was halter broken and you could get a saddle on her. That was about it. She was still terrified of everything. She had never been taught that things weren't scary. She'd never been taught that people weren't scary. As far as I could tell when we got her, we think that she was used as a brood mare and that she'd been abused by one of her past owners somewhere down the line. I don't know how many past owners she had. I have no clue. I did contact the BLM. The BLM told me she was brought in as a 4-year-old. She stayed in their facility for 4 months before she was adopted, and somehow she ended up from Utah into Indiana, and that was when I found her when she was 16. I have no clue what happened between the time she was 4 and the time she was 16, honestly. So I've done a lot of work with her, and she's probably the best horse I've ever ridden. She's very, very sensitive, and she really isn't sure about new people, but I think that goes back to her just not trusting anyone, that she's just not used to them. But she has gotten a lot better about that the last year or so. And then with her, she's kind of an all-around horse for me. She doesn't really do much jumping because I don't think she can see it very well. I think she might have some vision troubles now that she's getting older, and she just can't quite see the jumps. She can do cross rails and very small jumps, but that's about it. But she can do pretty much everything else. She's won Western Pleasure, Halter, English Pleasure. She came in 4th in a cross rail jumping class. She's won barrel racing, pole bending, And then Keyhole. Keyhole, she came in third. She got third in flags. And then she won down and back as well against horses in that event. So she's pretty quick and she's very smart. My other horse, he's going to be, I have to think about this, I haven't had him as long. He'll be 15 this year. And he's a Paint Arabian Cross. I bought him from the family that had owned him and trained him. There are a couple of things that I had to retrain along the way, just for my own purposes. But I use him as a jumper and a 3-day event horse. So far, he's jumped cross country through novice level, but we've only competed as starter. I haven't had the chance to take him any place that has a water jump that I could practice in. So he's kind of afraid of the water, but everything else he does fine. And then I think the best I've done with him, we won a dressage class, and then we tied for 6th at the Champagne Run Horse Trials in our division. And then there were 22 people in our division, so we did pretty good for our first year actually competing in 3-day eventing. The airbrush that I use is an Iwata Eclipse. It's a bottom feed. I know there's another word for it, but I can't think of it. It's a bottom feed, which means it just has bottles that you stick underneath it, and you can change the bottles to change the color. I had a top feed airbrush, but I personally didn't like it. It's kind of a personal preference. It doesn't make a huge difference. My top feed, I had so much trouble with it clogging that I just got tired of it. I don't have near as much trouble with my bottom feed clogging, and I don't have to completely clean the thing out every single time I want to change the color. All I have to do is just stick the bottle of airbrush cleaner on there, spray it out, and stick the new color on there. So I just think it's a lot easier to use, but there's nothing wrong with the top feed if that's what works for you. That's an impossible question, especially with how many horses that I have. I have well over 1,000 models in my collection now, if you count all the small ones and all the mini-winnies and all the stablemates. Well over 1,000 at this point. I stopped counting years ago on how many that I had. But that's seriously like an impossible question, because there are immediately like 10 horses that all come into my mind that are very important to me for very different reasons. If I absolutely had to pick one, I would probably pick my World Equestrian Games Fjord, because there's only 18 made of him, and he's been a very good show horse for me, and I don't know if I would ever be able to replace him. I got him from the World Equestrian Games. He was the first horse I picked up when I was there at their Breyer booth. And I mean, he's got memories along with him from all kinds of different model horse shows that I've been to, and he was the first model that I ever had that got a championship, so he's just very important to me in that way. And then, I mean, I've got Auld Lang Syne, who's probably my favorite model as far as color. I've got Creme de la Creme, who I won at Breyerfest this year, again because she's rare. I've got the Glossy Picasso because he's rare. I've got Hermosa because she was the one that won the Glossy Picasso and the Creme de la Creme. I don't know, it's just so hard to pick one when there's so many of them, and you know, each of them have a different story to you or a different memory to you in one way or another. My favorite part of customizing, this is going to sound really weird, but it's probably when they're done, just because I like seeing the finished product. Like, the airbrushing part of it for me gets kind of boring after a couple of horses, and since I do them in batches of anywhere between 5 and 8, you know, after a couple horses I'm kind of like, I'm getting tired of this, you know, I want to move on to something else. I also really like painting white markings. So having white markings that take me forever doesn't bother me at all, just because I really like doing that part, because it's, to me, is a little bit mindless, because after I get that first layer blocked in, it's all just going over it again and again and again. And at the same time, that's something that I can sit on the couch and do. I don't have to sit in my workroom and do it. So I can sit and watch a movie while I do it, or listen to a movie while I do it. It's a little bit more accurate. So it'd probably be kind of a toss-up between doing white markings or just when they're done altogether, because I don't know, I just really love it when they're done, because I like to see, what they started out as compared to what they've turned into. That, and when they're done, I can take them to shows, and the shows are fun, so there's a whole bunch of fun stuff that comes with after they're done. At this point, I think that answer would be yes. Kind of an obvious answer. How many? I don't really know. I started showing in 2013, and I think I probably went to about 4 shows that year, 3 or 4 shows the first year. One of them was an all-mini show, and all the others, I don't know, it's just hard because we do have shows around here, but now that I'm away at college, I can't go to half of them because they're so far away. It takes me 3 hours to get home, and then usually another 3 hours to the show. So they always have to land on a weekend where it's either a long weekend or when I'm on break or something like that. And so there just aren't that many shows that I can go to anymore. The first year I did 4 shows, and I did all right. I mean, my customs weren't doing very well, but there were a couple of at that point I didn't really understand confirmation or references or any of that. So I just kind of put them on the table and went with it, and I probably was really lucky to get what I got, because I had a custom on the Midnight Sun mold that I really liked her at the time, but at this point I'm like, I look at stuff that I've done now and I'm like, man, I could have done that way better, but or it would look better on a different mold as well. And it got 2 NAN cards at 2 different shows, but they were also very small classes, because they were Tennessee Walker classes, and around here, for whatever reason, there just aren't that many custom Tennessee Walkers. So, I don't know. But I think that was the first custom I ever had that got a NAN card as well. I don't have that horse anymore. I sold it years ago, probably after that first year of showing. I typically go to about 4 a year. Sometimes it's a little less, sometimes it's a couple more than that. My next show, I was going to talk about that too. My next model horse show is New Year's Bash on March 5th of this year. Right now, that's the only show that I have on the schedule, but I'm kind of waiting to figure out summer plans before I start trying to plan for other shows. And for New Year's Bash, again, that's another one of those shows where it's a 3-hour drive home and then a 3-hour drive to the town. So it's a 6-hour drive total that I'm all making in one day, which is not going to be fun, but I'll figure it out. The only reason that one worked out is because it landed over my spring break, the very first weekend of my spring break. So I'm going home at the end of January, I think, to pack for that show. I had to guess it would probably be somewhere around 200. I don't have an exact number on it. I've never counted them, and I don't have pictures of all of them anymore. Somewhere along the line I lost some of the pictures, so I can't go back and just count pictures either. But if I had to include all of the small ones that I've done, which is pretty much what I started out on, was just small models, and then all of the stuff that I've done within the last couple of years, I'd have to say was somewhere around 200. I did almost 40 just last summer alone, plus the 10 that I did over winter break within the last month. And I know that the summer before that I did more than 40. I don't know how for sure how many it was, but I know it was more than 40. So it's got to be somewhere around 200. Could be a little more, could be a little bit less. I have no idea. Like I said, I didn't count them. I don't have a way to count them, so I don't know. But like I said, links to everything, Facebook, Instagram, website, all down in the description. And then I think the next video I put up will probably be the New Year's Bash results.